And good morning to everybody. Glad you could join us today. Thanks to RSU TV. I'm going to do a couple of introductions. First of all, I'm Larry Wilson, and I am the only social studies teacher in sixth grade at Sequoyah Middle School. I want to give a shout out to my sixth grade class. You guys have been missing. Everybody. No, you guys are at home just like me, hunkered down. But I'm glad you're here. Glad you could join us on television today. I want to talk today about history, but I hope that word history doesn't immediately send you to sleep. I think we can learn many things from history, and I think we're going to learn something about ourselves today. Something I think that we need to hear today. I want to use the word resilient. Now, the word resilient is an interesting word. But if you take a squishy ball and you scrunch it up and you make it as small as you can, what happens when you let it go? It pops back out. You squish it down and it pops back out. That is resilience. And I'm not talking about resilience of squishy balls. I'm talking about resilience of people, of human beings like you and like me. Oklahoma is resilient. And that's what history teaches us. Like, really, I think no other state. We have a fascinating history. We're resilient. And as we look through history, we're going to see we've weathered many storms. I was talking just before we began production here. When you get old like me, you've got a lot of history. And you look back on it. And you can draw from a lot of things. When we're young, we don't have as much history to think back on. I know many in my class and many of the students I've taught over the years think I'm still in my 30s. At least that's what they tell me. They get extra points, of course. No, they don't. I remember when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. That's how old I am. I was in grade school, and it was a traumatic event on all of America. All the children, we didn't play out in the streets anymore. All of us went in. We watched the television. I remember my mom saying that we don't laugh. We don't laugh today. It's a very serious day. And so I can go back and draw upon those things and remember history. And it's taught me some things, and it teaches us some things as we look back. We need to remember, and you'll learn this more and more, but we stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before us. Now, I'm not talking about literally standing on somebody's shoulders, but I'm saying the generation that went before us, the generations that went before us, we stand on their shoulders. We owe them a debt for what they've done, what they've been through. And we can take courage and strength from studying their life. So history's alive. It's not just memorizing dates and places, but it's also learning what has this given to me? How has this made me? How has this shaped me into who I am? So we're going to do a little bit of that this morning. I'm going to give a historical list of some of the storms that we've faced in Oklahoma. And I'll challenge you. I can only briefly mention these. I would love for you to find one of interest and go look it up. Do some study about it. Read about them. That will help you. It will help you to be strong, and it will help you to be fearless in any storm we face in life. In the current storm we're in, we need to remember it's not the first storm we faced. We're folks from Oklahoma. We've seen many storms. We're resilient. We don't shatter. We don't break. The Trail of Tears. I'm going to try to remember to do these. There we go. 1820, 1842. Andrew Jackson was president, and he developed a policy of Indian removal. In fact, it was called the Indian Removal Act, and you'll have to pardon me for drinking water now and then. Some 60,000 Native Americans were removed from their homes in the southeast part of Oklahoma, or the southeast part of the United States, moved them to what they called Indian Territory. Oklahoma didn't exist yet. The Cherokee, the Muskogee, the Seminole, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, other tribes later in different periods, each one had their own Trail of Tears. Pawnee, the Iowa, the Osage, many of the Wichita we talk about Apache, we talk about Comanche, just to name some of the various groups that had their own Trail of Tears. But in the removal of during the Andrew Jackson presidency, 4,000 people, and I've seen figures up to 8,000, perished on their way from southeast United States to Oklahoma. Disease they died of, starvation, exposure, and I think something else we failed to mention many times, they died of broken hearts. But when they arrived in Oklahoma, they didn't lie down and quit. They didn't give up. They built a new life. They started over. They created a new community. They created their people all over again. And we're part of that in Oklahoma. That's part of who we are. It's in our Oklahoma DNA. Trail of Tears shaped us in Oklahoma. The second historical thing I want to mention is you can't talk about that period of time without mentioning the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865. We call it the war of brother against brother, but it is also the war of Native American against Native American. I have a flag here of the Cherokee Braves, the Cherokee Mounted Rifles. Now, for many reasons, and some of them I think are fairly obvious, the Native Americans in what was called then Indian Territory sided with the Confederacy. Some 8,000 Native Americans from Oklahoma, what is now Oklahoma, served as officers and enlisted men in the Confederate Army. The Cherokee Braves fought for the Confederacy. And there were many, many battles in Oklahoma. We just don't talk about them very often. I think it's a very neglected area of history study. I think it was the Battle of Falling Rocks, or it was the the waterfall incident. But there was a huge battle not fought very far from where I live. You just keep going past 169, get on 76th Street, drive, go across Highway 75 right there. There's one martyr. Nothing's changed. The battlefield's still there. And you had thousands of casualties. You had field hospitals set up. It was an immense area of conflict. The Confederate cavalry, Cherokee Braves, were there, and they fought against some other Native Americans. You had white and Native American forces together. You had the same who were fighting for the Union side. It was a terrible time, but it shaped who we are. And it shaped us as Oklahomans. The Civil War made us what we are today. After the Civil War, many freed slaves moved to Oklahoma area. They set up what were called the black cities, black towns that existed. Some of them are still there. They're very small, but they set up and they began again and started new lives and made Oklahoma stronger. If I want to mention the Civil War, let me mention some other conflicts. Study history, of course, is a study of human conflict. We can talk about the bigger wars that we fought: World War I, World War II, Korean War from 1950 to 1953. I put up a picture here. I could mention Vietnam was the war when I was growing up. We could talk about the war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq. This is Sergeant, he was Sergeant then, Van Barfoot, He later got promoted to second lieutenant, but he earned the Medal of Honor with the 45th Infantry Division. The 45th mainly drew their troops out of Oklahoma. It was the Oklahoma Division. They were sent to Italy. And there is not a single war that the United States has engaged in that has not brought people from Oklahoma. Every tribe, every Native American people have sent soldiers and warriors to war with the United States. And they're very proud, very, very proud veterans. And we hold them in high esteem. Many people from Oklahoma who are not Indian have gone to war and fought for this country. I mention him because he won the Medal of Honor. He was Choctaw. Won it in May 1944 in Italy as the 45th fought up that terrible, terrible spine of mountains that is Italy. Jack Montgomery was another Medal of Honor winner. He was Cherokee. Ernest Childers was Muskogee. There are 26 others from Oklahoma, Indian, non-Indian, but they've all won the Medal of Honor at different times in different wars. Many, many Oklahomans have given their lives to let us have the freedom that we do have. One thing I'll say, Oklahoma is a very patriotic state, and that's part of our resiliency. We've had trials and we've had storms, but one thing we do is we love our country. And every time I've ever been to a funeral for Native American, or if I've been to a gathering, there's always American flags there because they understand that connection to this great country. That's Oklahoma. Most states don't have that, but we do. It has helped to shape us. We don't forget the sacrifices of the 45th Division or the others who fought in all the various other wars. We don't forget our folks serving now in harm's way. They're the ones that help shape us and make us resilient. We're able to bounce back. Not only are we able to bounce back, we're able to come back better than before, stronger than before. Fourth thing I want to mention is the great flu pandemic of 1918. That shaped us as a state. I need to get us our new flight. That is a hospital scene. They would take buildings and convert them into hospitals. Some of them have tent cities. Some people were outside. Let me give you a few statistics on the great pandemic. It was called the Spanish flu. We don't really know where it came from. It was called the Spanish flu because during World War I, all the countries that were at war had limits on what you could talk about, and no one talked about their diseases in their country. Spain was a neutral country, and they started talking about, their press started talking about this terrible flu, so it became known as the Spanish flu. Some evidence, and I think pretty good evidence, shows it started in Kansas at a military base. And as the U.S. went to war, it went with them. And all the other nations that were there caught it, and everybody went home to their different places, and it became a worldwide pandemic. 20 to 50 million people worldwide died of the Spanish flu in 1918. 500 million were infected. You know, these numbers stagger us because they're more than I can imagine. 675,000 Americans died. More people died from the flu than died from World War I. I read an article last night of an Oklahoma City resident, and I will quote him. He said, "People died like flies. Schools were closed, churches were closed, business was closed, and that was all over the country, and it was right here in Oklahoma. Cities would they just had to close up. Only essential services, and things were very, very scary. There was really no no cure. I did come across an interesting thought. I hope I don't get in trouble. Oh well. In Oklahoma, in the 1918 flu pandemic, there was not a run on toilet paper. However, there was a run on whiskey. And it became so scarce that it sold for $18.22 a quart. And $18.22 was a chunk of change back in that day, when you might work all day for a nickel. Prices went up, things got scarce, just like they do now. In Oklahoma, 7,500 people died from the flu. Another 100,000 were ill, and the state was much smaller in its population than it is now. Those were tough times. But I told you, we stand on the shoulders of people who went before us. We've been through tough times. We've been through times like this, and we've come back, and we will come back again. One of my goals here is I don't want us to be afraid. I don't want us to live in fear. To put it in Oklahoma terms, this isn't our first rodeo. We've been down these roads. Talk to your grandparents or your great-grandparents. Ask them about some of the things they've been through. It would be a good conversation to have. If you can get grandma or great-grandma off their cell phone, you could do that. So tell them to put it up. Talk to them. Visit with them. Learn about their experiences. Another thing that shaped us, and I can't begin to cover everything. And I know I'll leave some things. I'm not even going to begin to talk about our tornadoes. Tornadoes have shaped us. We're in Tornado Alley. And we could talk about how that has shaped us and how that has molded us and how entire cities, entire families have been totally destroyed. But I need to mention the Tulsa race massacre. It's called the Tulsa Massacre. It's called the Black Wall Street, destruction of Black Wall Street. May 31st to June 1st, 2 days in 1921. It is described by most historians. You can see a picture here of the destruction. "35 square blocks of homes and businesses were burned to the ground. It's called the single worst incident of racial violence in American history. And the investigation, you can go there to this Greenwood area now, which I did a tour. It's by myself and my son. All that's left of homes are the steps. You can see steps that go up from the street where there used to be a house, and you'll see the foundation stones. That's it. Block after block after block of homes. You can see where businesses used to be. It's just nothing left but the foundation stones. These still are hard things to deal with. They're hard things to grasp. But as a person who believes in a good study of history, we need to just keep searching. We need to come to the truth, but truth must prevail, and we must move forward. We need to do the right thing, but we must not ever fail to learn from these things, because if we fail to learn from them, I think it was George Santayana who said those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Many have said that, and it's true. A sixth thing I want to mention, the Great Depression. The Great Depression shaped Oklahoma, that and the Dust Bowl, I think, more than any other events. In the Great Depression, the 1929 stock market failure, to say about 1939, the start of World War II, is a worldwide depression. Massive unemployment, food lines, terrible poverty, hunger. Oklahoma got hit very, very hard. I read of people who had to live in chicken houses, chicken coops, and felt very good about it. This is a famous picture of the tent city. That's not a temporary housing. That's permanent housing for them. The poverty was just devastating. But it wouldn't always be that way. It took a lot of hard work, and it took a lot of time, and it took a lot of patience. But America came through that, and Oklahoma came through that. Hard times, we call it. And they were hard times. But we're from Oklahoma. We're resilient. We've been through times like this, when businesses are closed down, when businesses fail. And I hope you're not touched by that. I hope someone in your family still has a job. But there are some families where no one does. And our heart goes out to them. But we need to remember we've been through that. We can come through that, and we will. Let me mention the Dust Bowl. I think the Dust Bowl, this is a picture out in Oklahoma Panhandle of a dust storm come rolling in. From 1930 to 1939, it just stopped raining. The wind picked up. The wind blows all the time here. We know that. Out in western Oklahoma, it blew up the topsoil, great mounds of it, and it made these humongous dust storms that lasted for mile after mile. It made everything dark. Even at noontime, you could not see more than 3 feet, sometimes less. Our topsoil was, they called it the dirty 30s. And they called it the dirty 30s because it was dirty. You couldn't keep your house clean. Dust, dirt seeped into every place. Our topsoil blew to New York City, Washington, D.C., all over as the winds tended to blow that direction. It dropped Oklahoma topsoil there. Out of this era came what we call the Okies. John Steinbeck wrote about it in The Grapes of Wrath, which I hope you read. We were Okies, they called us. And some of us went to California. Some of us went to other places. The people of California and Washington and Oregon meant it as a cruel joke, a cruel word, but we took it and made something new out of it. We're good at that. But we were resilient. I need to talk about the decade I grew up in, for the most part. The 60s. That's when everything was groovy. Peace, love, flower power. It's tubular. It's cosmic. It's hip. There's a lot of words like that. I don't remember all of them. I was never any of those things. It's just what I heard. It's called the decade of upheaval, the 60s. And the United States changed. And Oklahoma changed. Everything. Vietnam War raged. Protests grew violent. Counter-protests. Assassinations. This was, I mentioned in the beginning the assassination of John Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963 at Dealey Plaza in Dallas. And most of us have seen that film of him riding in that open limousine. That shook America to the core. People wept in the streets. People wept in Oklahoma. His brother ran for president 5 years later, and he was assassinated June 8th, 1968 at the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. And we don't ever want to forget Martin Luther King Jr., assassinated April the 8th, 1968. These were terrible times. I pray to God that his dream come true someday. He had a dream. We need to have a dream. Oklahoma City bombing shaped us. This is from the memorial. This is the names of the children they put the little bears on. It's a moving place you need to go to. Every Oklahoman needs to go there. I need to mention the Twin Towers. 4 jets. 2 crashed into the Twin Towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and 1 crashed into the earth in a field at Shanksville, Pennsylvania, because the passengers rose up and said the terrorists aren't going to win this plane. And they didn't. Those were hard years. They're still hard. People still grieve these losses from Oklahoma City, from the September 11th attacks. And we need to remember that. We should grieve with them. we learn things from history. And we learn that we are resilient people. I need to mention one more thing. That is a depiction of the coronavirus. There's lots and lots of coronaviruses out there. In fact, as I understand it, the common cold is from a coronavirus. Right now, I looked at it this morning, there's about 2.7 million cases worldwide. Worldwide, 184,000 have died. It reminds us a lot of the epidemic of 1918 I mentioned. But we're not going to give in to fear. We're not going to cave into despair. History teaches us, we're from Oklahoma, and we don't do things like that. We don't do things like that. So I want you to go on with your life. Be cautious, be safe, be careful, be smart, but don't be afraid and don't live in fear. That's the lesson that we're going to learn from our history today. Thank you for letting me be with you. If you have any questions, specifically, drop me a line. I will try to answer those as best I can. You can do that at my web address on sequoiaheagles.net, and I'll give you a nice answer. Even if I don't know, remember, I don't know is an answer. So I promise I can answer any question you ask. I will give you one. So thank you very much for having me today, putting up with me, inviting me into your home with RSU. And we thank the folks at RSU for letting us do this.